What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Big Dog Brett. Thanks so much for tuning in today. We've got a really special show for you guys. I'm joined by the one and only Pigskin Pete. Basically, the most knowledgeable Clemson fan I can find. The guy's very objective. Pays a lot of attention to the teams and what's going on. So if you guys get a chance, go check out his show. He also does a show with Uncle Lou. I believe it's called Lunch Money, where they kind of go over the betting lines of stuff. So he's really in tune with what goes on the Clemson side of things, and just generally very knowledgeable about college football. So if you get an opportunity, go check out Pigskin Pete. Like, subscribe, and share to his channel. And today we're going to give you a breakdown on the UGA opener. We're going to tell you everything about the game from both sides of the perspective. We're going to look at all the position groups. We're going to look at the advantages for Georgia, my pick, his pick. Final score prediction is going to come up at the end. So if you guys get a chance, if you can make it through the whole thing, is a ton of great information here. Both of us make some pretty valid points, very objective points, something I think you guys really appreciate. So we'll be seeing you guys in just a few seconds.
Shut up and sit down.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. Big Dog Brett here, along with Pigskin Pete. As you guys know, Pigskin Pete is probably the most resounding source right now of intelligent, objective Clemson review. He takes a real serious view on the team. He doesn't buy into the hype. He actually uses his brain, which seems to be difficult for both Georgia fans and Clemson fans to do sometimes. So welcome to the show, Pete.
Thanks, man. I haven't traded in my homer card quite yet, though. I'm still a complete homer, and I'm sure you'll probably hear some of that come out during this conversation. But anyways, it's good to do a show with you, buddy.
I really, really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
Both of us are obviously, very much infatuated with our teams, which is good. We can give a passionate review. We wanted to give you guys a breakdown of both teams, my point of view, his point of view, because there really has been a lot of pieces that have moved around. A lot of things have changed for both teams. There's been a lot of stuff that was done 2 or 3 months ago before there's been some player movement, some player action along with recruiting that has come into play. I've had an opportunity to do a little bit of breakdown on both teams, but I haven't done a full Clemson review. I kind of talked about some of the players coming back a while back, but man, Clemson's got a lot coming back this year. So
especially on defense, yeah.
Yeah, you want to go ahead and jump into the strengths of the defense there, or what's your thoughts on it?
Well, in my opinion, they're going to have one of the top 3 defensive lines in all of college football. The weakness has been this year is going to be the same thing it's been really over the past 5 years. Is the defensive backfield? Now we got a lot of guys, we got a lot of depth at that position more than most years, but Clemson is returning. They're returning 10 starters on defense. Of course, the one that's missing, the one that got away, is our boy Darian Kendrick. Of course, he didn't get away; he was kicked off the team, and he landed in Georgia, and good for him. But so this would be an extremely experienced defense. That last year, I believe they were starting 6 freshmen on defense, true freshmen.
Yeah.
So that's the main difference defensively from last year to this year. It's going to be a lot more experienced.
Now, I've got to admit, I absolutely agree with you that I think that Clemson's going to have one of the top 3. I would argue to say at top 2 defensive lines in the country. Yeah. The defensive line you guys have is absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
I'm a little bit. I won't say going to want to negate some of that, but I definitely want to address that having a strong offensive line now is not as important as it was to have a strong defensive line 6-7 years ago. Simply because college football is changing to more of an air raid style. So it's no longer that 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Granted, having a strong offensive line is absolutely beneficial and useful, but I think having one 5 years ago was much more important. I think with the run and gun style that we're seeing now, it's the DB situation that concerns me for both teams. Georgia is getting some pretty substantial DBs. We're getting the number one DB in the country out of West Virginia, getting Brandon Turnage from Alabama, and as you mentioned earlier, Darian Kendrick. Darian Kendrick really is an all ACC player. Granted, he does have a troubled past. Both teams in the past have picked up players with troubled past before. Hopefully, he can get it turned around. For those of you who don't know, Darian Kendrick was arrested, I believe, because he had some drug paraphernalia, if not drugs itself, and even a pistol in the vehicle with him. I think it was asleep in a parking lot at a gas station. If I got that wrong, just straighten me out there, Pete. It looks like those charges may end up being dropped entirely, if not completely reduced to misdemeanors. So I'm not making excuses for his behavior, but I also don't want to hear the whole felony university thing, because that's Florida.
Yeah, well, I mean, that incident with the gun and the weed is what you're referring to. That happened after he already got kicked off the team. So he's had a history of getting in trouble long before that. Now, not with the law, just with the football program.
Wasn't he like showing up late or to practice, or not showing up at all or something?
Well, he left the campus. This is the last straw. I mean, he's had several suspensions.
Okay.
In his last couple of seasons, just team suspensions, not NCAA suspensions or anything. But the last straw was he left campus and went back to. So he's from a city not far from Clemson, and he went back home and just stopped reporting to this facility and stopped reporting to class, which is probably the more important thing.
Right.
He claims that he had a sick child and had to leave, but he didn't let anybody know that before he left.
And to me, even though he wanted to come join Georgia, it's a little concerning.
Yeah.
I mean, having a sick child is one thing. I think that there's plenty of football players that have kids. There's plenty of other athletes that have kids, and they contend with that. The universities are used to contending with that. I don't think that would have been a big deal. I think that was just kind of an excuse, or an attempt at an excuse.
Well, I mean, from a football standpoint, the guy's a really good player. Okay, he was a 5-star athlete coming out of high school. He wasn't a 5-star defensive back, but that doesn't really matter. He was a quarterback in high school.
Right.
He played his freshman year at Clemson as a wide receiver, and Clemson was so loaded at wide receiver and not so loaded at defensive back that they moved him from wide receiver to defensive back, where he's played the last 2 seasons. And he's done pretty much what you would expect from a great athlete that's only played that position for 2 seasons. He's had some really great games and some not so great games, but he's extremely experienced. He's one of the best athletes on the field every time he steps on the football field. If he can keep his nose clean, both figuratively and literally, at the University of Georgia, he will be, at the very least, he will add significant depth to the position.
Now, I think that his 2019 season was obviously his best season. I mean, this guy was all over the field. A couple of interceptions, 13 assists, 30 solo tackles. Absolutely dominant performance. But it seemed like last year in the 2020 season, he had a little bit of that, a little bit of a slump. But he's definitely a very impressive player. Georgia's, lucky to be able to pick up talent like that out of the transfer portal. I think there's some other players. I think going into this particular game, this particular season, Georgia's biggest weakness was obviously at the cornerback position. Georgia seems to have done a pretty good job of strengthening up that position. What do you think, on a scale from 1 to 10, what would you rate Clemson's defensive back set at right now? Obviously, one being Vanderbilt and 10 being the previous years of Clemson.
It's pretty much it's almost identical to the defensive back situation at Clemson for the past 4 or 5 years. It's just not a lot of depth. It's mainly your starters are all players like Darian Kendrick that could start for just about any team in America.
Yeah.
But it's especially at the cornerback position, safety position, we're doing pretty good depth-wise. At the cornerback position, there's you get 1 or 2 injuries, and then you're starting having to fill holes in. So I would say on a scale from 1 to 10, if that's the question, I would say a 7.
Okay.
But I would give Clemson a 7 every year since 2014.
I probably, not last year, but maybe the year before that, I would have given you guys probably an 8.5, if not a 9. You guys have really elite guys in the defensive backfield. This year, I think 7's fair. I think Georgia's probably right there at about that same 7 mark. And we wouldn't be there without the transfer portal. So I think that's a big think it's a big benefit to Georgia. So I think we're kind of evenly stacked up there.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the next big elephant in the room. Let's talk about the quarterback situation. I know a lot of people don't know a lot about DJ, and we're just going to not kill his name today. So we got JT versus yeah, only Clemson fans and announcers can say that name properly. Maybe.
Yeah, that's fine. We can just call him DJ or Big Cinco. Okay. That's his nickname.
Okay, Big Cinco. I like it. So Big Cinco, not a ton of on-field consistent performance, but the games that he has played in, he's been very, very impressive. Now, and everybody likes to point out, he threw for over 8,000 yards against Notre Dame, and but he lost the game, and I'm pretty quick to tell people that wasn't his fault. He doesn't play defense, so
yeah, he couldn't have played any better than he played.
He could not have played any better. His numbers were outstanding in that game. My question is that do you feel like starting off the season against a big name team like Georgia, is he going to be in a rhythm already, or do you think he's going to be? Maybe they should have played him a little more at the end of last year.
Well, that's a great question. I think that there's few quarterbacks to come in and do what DJ did not only last year, but he's a guy that can handle the big lights. A lot like Deshaun Watson was when he came out of high school, a lot like Trevor Lawrence was when he came out of high school. There's just not that many quarterbacks that have played big time football at a big time school in high school and played as well as DJ did. So this guy's been a superstar since he's been in the 8th grade. Okay. A lot like DJ and a lot like Trevor. I mean, a lot like Watson and a lot like Trevor. So no, as far as we learned, I mean, the Clemson's biggest game of the regular season was on the road at Notre Dame last year. And he did, he had no problem handling the size of the game and the magnitude of the game. Now, granted, Georgia is not Notre Dame, so I all the people that are going to type in the comment section, you don't compare Georgia to Notre Dame. I completely understand that part of it, but I think that game in itself was huge. To sort of what's the word I'm looking for here? To knock the cobwebs off, so to speak, in big time football. I'm not worried about that part of it in the least. I think he'll be fine.
I think he'll be fine. My concern, and obviously we're going to nitpick each other. It's just, it is what it is. I feel like he played really well against Boston College. He went 30 for 41. He put up 342 yards. That's pretty solid. I mean, his completion percentage was over 73%. That's solid. In the Notre Dame game, where he did put up 439 yards, he had a completion rating of 66%. Still pretty good. Georgia's played against other quarterbacks that have had similar completion percentages. Now, he threw the crap out of the ball. He threw it 44 times. That's a lot. I mean, he did average 10 yards a throw. Georgia has played against a lot of teams that have quarterbacks that average that much and more and have beat those teams. So, again, I don't feel – and it took 2 overtimes, so he kind of had extra time to play. Well, let's be fair. I don't know what he put up in regulation, but I don't think it was over 400. I think the kid's got a lot of talent. I don't know if starting off against a big team like Georgia, or we'll just even say in Ohio State when they're in gear, is a fair way to break this guy in. I feel like if it was 3 or 4 games in, I'd be a little more worried about him. But I think that first game right out of the season, I would rather play him the first game than I had played game 4. I also feel like I don't really feel like Dabo did him any favors, because the last time he played anything meaningful was against Pitt, where he blew him out, but he only had 7 attempts. 7 completions. He did really well in that game, but his longest pass was 9 yards. I just don't feel like he was given an opportunity to play to his potential, and I feel like that might hurt him a little bit.
Yeah, well, they played a lot of guys.
They did.
I mean, but you got to understand. I mean, 90% of the games that Clemson plays in, especially in the ACC, they're the games in hand by halftime, and they play everybody on the roster.
Now, I will tell you the thing that I really do like about him is his size, and for his size, he moves extremely well.
Well, see, this is the thing about the Notre Dame game. that goes unnoticed. He was hurt. He had a shoulder injury during that game.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So Clemson, Tony Elliott, the offensive coordinator for Clemson, loves to run the quarterback. He's ever since he's been there. That's his MO. Okay. Usually there's at least 5 or 6 design quarterback runs per game, and then there's a bunch of scrambles. So every quarterback that you've seen come through, whether it was Deshaun Watson, Kelly Bryant, even Trevor Lawrence, they run these quarterbacks a lot. In the Notre Dame game, because he had a shoulder injury on his non-throwing shoulder, they didn't really do any much running with him in that game. So that was one of the reasons why he had such, threw the ball 44 times, is because they didn't run the quarterback as much as they normally like to.
Right.
So that's something that Georgia's going to have to deal with. Another element that they're going to have to deal with is him using his legs, because, like you just said, this is an enormous human being, people. Okay.
Oh yeah, 6'4".
He's 6'4", 260. So he's basically Cam Newton when Cam Newton was, in his 3rd year in the NFL.
And he wasn't wearing many pearl hats.
And I like to compare him to Cam Newton physically, because they're just both giant people.
Right.
He's a way better passer than Cam Newton ever thought about being.
Yeah.
So that's another added element to it.
Now that we've picked on, DJ, we got to pick on JT Daniels, a little bit here. And I think part of picking on JT Daniels is going to force you to pick on, Georgia's coaching staff a little bit. And I know good and well there's going to be Georgia homers on here that's yelling at me for doing this, but
can we pick on his mustache?
He doesn't have it anymore.
Oh, he shaved it off. Okay, never mind then.
I'm just going to say that so we don't. I'm gonna shave mine off and mail it to him so he has something better.
Yeah.
So he really only played in 4 games last year. JT Daniels played against Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Missouri, and we could all make the argument that these are pretty terrible teams, right?
Right.
But what I will say is, while he played in 4 games and DJ played in 3 or 4 games, the 4 games that JT played in were a lot more meaningful. He had 38 throws in 1 game. He only had 16 against South Carolina, but we didn't need much. We had 27 against Missouri, and then we had almost 40 against Cincinnati with 38. With Georgia winning that pretty much on a last-second field goal, and then we just topped it off with a safety just because, I guess.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. If you look at his long throws in all of these games, there's a 37-yarder, a 40-yarder, a 49-yarder, and a 55-yarder.
Yeah.
So he's very comfortable throwing the long ball. He's definitely very good at it. Now, he only put up 140 yards against South Carolina, so not a banner game. Those are more Jake Fromm numbers. But against Missouri, he did almost 300. He was 299. Against Cincinnati, who was the number 8th ranked team in the country in regulation, he put up 392 yards. And against Mississippi State, he broke 400. Now, to give you an idea of how good that is, I don't know. I'm not sure if you're familiar with a gentleman by the name of Aaron Murray.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Aaron Murray was the last quarterback at Georgia to break 400 yards against an SEC opponent.
Mm-hmm.
And JT Daniels is the only one that I can find in UGA history that has done over 400 yards against an SEC opponent and not thrown an interception doing it. So he's got a lot of experience. He's got a lot of talent. In his 2018 season, he threw for 2,700 yards, and he had a knee injury. And like the first quarter and a half, where he blew out his knee, he had thrown for almost 225 yards, I think it was, so quite a bit. So he's got a lot of talent, and it looks like this is going to be the first offseason where he's had the opportunity to actually work with the wide receivers, the tight ends, have a full season where he's the starter, uncontested, and first full season of having fall and spring training camp under Todd Monken's new program. So I really think that JT Daniels, being a student of the game and having the additional experience, might be a bit of an advantage here for Georgia.
Yeah. I'd say the only thing I would say is as a negative for JT Daniels, obviously the guy's world class. I think he's one of the top 5 quarterbacks in all of college football this year. And we saw the difference of Georgia's offense with him behind center and without him. It was like night and day. is that he's kind of a statue back there. Clemson's defensive line. This is where I think the mismatch is going to happen, and not a huge mismatch because Georgia's going to have they always have a great offensive line. So I'm not saying it's going to be a rout in this situation, but he's not a guy that's going to be able to escape the pass rush that's coming at him all game long. I think you're going to see 2 or 3 sacks in this game, JT Daniels. And if they can make him uncomfortable enough, maybe a couple of interceptions as well, because they are going to throw the ball a lot more than they normally would. So the key here for Georgia is to do what Georgia is known for doing and establish the run game to keep those safeties in the box and keep them from blitzing.
So I kind of figured that you were going to bring up his lack of mobility. Now I'm going to separate out a little bit of the coaching a little bit and also separate out JT Daniels so we get a better understanding of the kind of coaching that we're getting from Todd Monken's offense. Georgia was winning at halftime against Alabama with Stetson Bennett at the helm.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to what would have happened in that game had we have had JT Daniels. Now, we've been told, since that there was some concern about his knee. JT Daniels said, I'm not concerned about my knee, but the coaching staff was. That's why they didn't start him. Now that he's had and let's back up a little bit. We both know that even though a player returns to the field after a knee injury and they say they're 100%, that first year, they're never 100%. Nick Chubb's a prime example. Todd Gurley's a prime example. Malcolm Mitchell's a prime example. You look at all of these football players that get these nasty knee injuries and then they come back and they play. That whole next year, they don't look like themselves. Nick Chubb come back his final year to really improve his draft stock because he knew his knee was going to be better. So I'm curious as to how well JT Daniels is going to function with a much improved knee that he's had over a year to actually get rehabilitated and back working again. So I do think that the offensive line is going to give him fits, but JT Daniels practically the comfort of home. Hold on a second here, that silly thing. JT Daniels got sacked 3 times against Mississippi State, twice against South Carolina, twice against Mizzou, and 3 times against Cincinnati. Cincinnati had a really good offensive line too. So it's not like he's not used to that or can't overcome that, but I definitely think it's something to be aware of. Is that's nothing new to him.
Right, and I understand the coming off of the knee injury thing, but that's just not his strong suit in the first place. I mean, the guy.
I agree.
The guy's a prototypical pocket passer. He's just not very mobile. And, even before his injury, when he was at Southern Cal, he wasn't very mobile. So it is what it is. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. Now the next thing that we've got to compare here. Now, so I'm going to give a slight edge to Georgia. I would say we're pretty even on defensive backs, maybe a slight edge to Clemson, just because there's more experience there inside of the Clemson program. Georgia does have some talent, but they're not necessarily experienced with the Georgia program. Georgia does get to learn a little bit about the Clemson program because we have one of you guys as players. I'm just saying that's going to play a factor. Clemson fans are telling me all about it, so I'm going to hand it back.
Okay, so look. So this is the old chicken and the egg debate, which came first. Okay, so yes, this is the debate I've been having with Georgia fans as well. But there's 2 sides to the coin. So obviously it's a very beneficial for the Georgia defensive coaching staff to pick the brain of Darian Kendrick, because Darian Kendrick's been going against Tony Elliott's offense for the past 3 years in practice every day. So he knows their tendencies. He knows the playbook. Hell, he played on offense for 1 year. So that is a huge advantage. I will give you that. The other side of this is that the Clemson coaching staff knows Darian Kendrick very well. Okay. Whenever he's on the field, they know his tendencies, they know his weaknesses, and they know his strengths. They know what coverage he works best in, what coverage he gets burned in. So they can also exploit that from an offensive standpoint for Clemson. I think they may pick on Kendrick a little bit about knowing what he's good and what he's not at.
I think that will play less of a factor than maybe what it normally would.
Right.
Simply because of the way Georgia rotates players in and out. Georgia will wait to the last second to swap players in and out. They do it all the time. So Clemson is going to have to be very quick on changing the plays, and they're going to have to be very fluid with it in order to take advantage of that. There's definitely a weakness there to take advantage of, but
you're right. And no, I agree. And so that's the chess match that you're going to see back and forth,
Right.
though, because they may have a situation where they tell DJ, if you see Darian come in, even if it's at the last minute and you see him in this coverage, draw. This is the play you're going to change to. So they'll have stuff like that in the books. But I think it's sort of 6, 1/2 dozen the other. I think
I agree.
Advantages for Georgia that Kendrick's on the team, and there's also advantages for Clemson knowing his tendencies.
Absolutely. Now, for those of you who don't know, Darian Kendrick is only 6 foot tall. So a lot of the wide receivers for Clemson are much taller than 6 foot. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. One of the things I do want to bring up is that both Georgia and Clemson are missing their 2, in my opinion, best wide receivers. Both of these guys would be easy first-round picks. Both of these guys make unbelievable catches when they're healthy, and that's Justin Ross and George Pickens.
Justin Ross is planning on being playing.
I agree. I understand that he's planning on being there, but just hear me out. So Justin Ross was pulled out because he had spinal injury, congenital fused. I can't remember all of the terminology, but it wasn't good. It basically said that it could have been a career-ending injury. I'm not sure that if his best intention is to go pro, is to put him in against an insane linebacker set like what Georgia has. Because Lewis Cine is dangerous. That guy's flying around the field out there looking to get himself a warrant for an assault. He's dangerous. And I'm not sure that that's the kind of player you want to throw him out there in the first game against.
Well, if he's cleared to play, he's playing. It doesn't matter who it's against. I would argue the opposite. I would say you need Justin Ross against a team like Georgia more than you need him against name any other team on the schedule that year.
No, I'm not saying Clemson doesn't need him. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is I'm not sure how much this guy's going to put himself in harm's way like he did before.
Yeah.
Because if he runs out there and he's catching a pass across the middle, and one of his favorite routes that they throw to Justin Ross is a slant, I don't know.
I tell you that I know the way that the coaching staff has handled these type of situations in the past. There's been criticism about it. I mean, you remember back in the Syracuse game when Kelly Bryant was a starter back in 2017. Kelly Bryant was out there limping around the entire game, and they kept him in. He ended up getting a concussion and getting knocked out of the game, and that was the criticism. Is you leave this guy, he's obviously hurt. You leave him on the field, you leave him exposed. He gets a concussion. A lot of criticism, even from me, for them doing it. If the guy is cleared to play, they won't pull out any stops with him. They won't limit him. They'll use him. They're going to use it on any given week. I promise.
I'm not saying he would. I'm not saying that the coaches wouldn't play him. I'm saying I'm not sure that the coaches would keep him. I'm not sure he would play at 100%. There's got to be some mental aspects there. Yeah. And I think it's going to take more than one game against Georgia to get back in the groove of things, especially an elite guy like that. When you're talking a guy who's out there and he's fast, everybody knows he's fast. He's fast. When he's out there and he's running a seam and you've got elite caliber defensive backs out there flying around next to him with him, that's not something you don't just jump back on that horse. It's not that easy. So I'm curious as to how he's going to handle that. I'm curious as to how the Clemson coaching staff's going to handle that, because if he's not getting it done and they pull him, what's that going to do to his mental state? So I'm not 100% sure.
I got you. I mean, Clemson's wide receiver room is absolutely loaded. So, I mean, he's the best. He's the best and most experienced guy on the team, no doubt about it. But they didn't have him all last season, so it's not like that they're used to not having him on the field at this point.
I still think, if I could take George Pickens in a heartbeat, I'd take him, and I know you guys would take Justin Ross. So I think both of us losing that player is a wash. I think that comes out to, as far as losing talent, I think that takes some stuff off the table.
But Pickens isn't playing though, right?
No, Pickens is not playing in the opener.
Ross will. I'm saying there's about 80% chance he'll start, and he'll probably play most of the snaps. I would imagine. So
I think he'll play. I don't know how much he'll be of necessarily a distraction, maybe, or how much he's actually going to be put in harm's way. And I'm a little curious as to how much they're going to do for him. to kind of protect him. Now, you guys get Amari Rodgers back, right?
No, Amari Rodgers is a Green Bay Packer, my friend.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So you don't have that guy. That was your top receiver.
No.
Cornell Powell?
Powell's in the NFL, too.
Oh, doggone it. Your third best receiver, what was his name? Travis Etienne. Wait a minute, he's gone too. So your next best receiver from last year is Braden Galloway. He's a tight end. He's 6'4".
Yeah.
So you guys lost. Your three best top guys. I know the room is stacked. Don't get me wrong, but the next receiver under that is EJ Williams, and he barely cleared 300 yards last year. Now he's good, and there's some other good tight ends around him, but I think it's worth pointing out that you guys lost some serious talent in the receiving room.
Well, Clemson loses serious talent in the wide receiver room every single season. This is nothing new. So, I mean, Joe Ngata, Frank Ladson, Joe. Now, last year, Ladson was hurt for the majority of the season, so he's. You look at the top 5 wide receivers on the team. You got 3 5-stars and 2 4-stars, and then you got some incoming big names as well as true freshmen, and they'll get a lot of playing time. But Justin Ross, Joe Ngata, Frank Ladson, Joe, EJ Williams, Bo Collins is coming in as a true freshman. He played. He was a teammate of DJ's of Big Cinco's at St. John's Bosco in high school.
Right.
Like you said, Galloway at tight end. So
there's definitely some talent there, but I mean, I think it's worth mentioning that you lost your quarterback, which probably the best quarterback I've seen, and next to maybe Joe Burrow in many years. Georgia, on the other hand, we do lose George Pickens, who was believe it or not, George Pickens was our number 2 wide receiver.
Yeah.
Karis Jackson is our number 1 guy. He's back from last year. Jermaine Burton's back from last year. James Cook is back from last year. Darnell Washington's back from last year. Kenny McIntosh is back. D-Rob transferred, but he was so bad, I think that's addition by subtraction. Rosemy St. Jack, or Jack Saint, he's Big Ocho because he's got one of those names too, so we're going to call him Big Ocho. Zamir White is back. And we get Dominic Blaylock back. Plus, we pick up Eric Gilbert as a wide receiver. And we get there was another guy there. I can't remember. Anyway, Georgia's wide receivers team, as far as what's coming back, is pretty impressive. And as far as I can look at it, I'm gonna give Georgia the advantage on this one, just because the guys that were number 1 and number 2, number 3, number 4 last year are all back. So from an experience, as a physical starter, like they're going to start first snap. Georgia's got all of those guys back. So yeah. I would say Clemson at 8. I would say Georgia 8.5. You can make an argument for numbers, saying that the receivers that are returning from Clemson had really solid numbers. Georgia had a little better. I mean, I can see that argument, but I think it's a really, really close line. I think 8.5, 8. That's my opinion.
Okay.
So who do you give the advantage to?
As far as a wide receiver go,
yeah.
I mean, I think it's pretty close, honestly. Okay. And it's a part of that is just quite honestly, is my ignorance on every single player that plays for Georgia. Just like I know Joe Ngata and Frank Ladson are world-class potential guys, but nobody in the country's ever heard of them before.
Right.
So, outside of Clemson. I think it's pretty close. I do.
Okay. So I'm going to change gears. We'll come back to the running backs here in a second and the offensive lines here in a second. I want to talk about the kicking game a little bit. You guys have a guy by the name of BT.
Yeah, BT
Potter.
5-star kicker. He was a 5-star. He was a 5-star kicker coming out of high school. I think he might be the only one in the history of football.
Yeah, this guy, extra points attempts, 62. Extra points made, 61.
Yeah,
that's a lot of touchdowns.
A lot of touchdowns.
And on top of that, he made 18 field goals out of 23.
Yeah.
So
He's he had a rough go his first season. Again, literally a 5-star kicker. So everybody in the country recruited the guy. He's a future NFL player.
Absolutely.
And he's got a huge leg. I mean, the guy can make a 70-yard field goal. But his first season, he was just like a shotgun. There was stuff flying over here, flying over there. You know,
he was excited, man.
Yeah, he had the bird shot going on. But he's really cleaned it up, and he's obviously a veteran of the team. So yeah, he'll be one of the best kickers in the country this year for sure.
So he's got quite a bit, and I'm looking at a stat sheet just so you know. He's 5 for 5 inside the 30. He's 5 for 8 between 30 and 40. This is an impressive number. 6 for 7 between 40 and 49.
Yeah.
And he's 2 for 3 at 50 plus. Now his long, I think he's kicked like 150-yarder and 152-yarder.
Yeah.
But still, that's impressive. So his longest is 52.
His freshman season, Dabo Swinney took a lot of criticism. You may remember this. You just might have not have known who the kicker was, but he was the one that Dabo Swinney chewed out on the sideline and benched.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And everybody was like, "Look at Dabo Swinney. He's a jerk. He's yelling at the kicker. He's benching him and this and that." Well, after that, he's been a totally different player. So it worked. It worked.
Well, so I've got to admit, this guy is an absolute world-class kicker.
Yeah.
But I have to compare him against Georgia.
Okay.
I'm not sure which number he missed as far as where the extra point miss was, whether it was at the beginning of the season, midway, or whatever. But I think missing one field goal extra point after attempting 62, I mean, come on, dude. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Georgia's also got a pretty solid kicker, Jack Podlesny. Jack Podlesny attempted 38, made 38, so that's 100%. But that's like 24 less than, Potter. So I can say, I would probably say I would find it difficult for any kicker to kick 62 and not miss at least one. Both of these are really good kickers. Field goal attempts, 23 for Potter, made 18 for a field goal percentage of 78. UGA attempted 16, made 13, right there at 81. The field goal attempt numbers here are so close that if you miss one way or the other, those numbers are going to be identical.
Yeah.
He's 100% inside the 30, 2 for 2.
That's good.
30, between the 30 and the 40, he's 6 for 7, which is solid. 40 to 49, he's 2 for 4, which is okay. It's not bad. Not going to complain too much. But at 50-plus yards, he's 3 for 3.
Good. So
his long is 53 yards. I think since these kickers are going to be going against each other, there's no way they're going to be kicking, an entire season's worth of stats. I don't see this game being an advantage either way for either one of these guys. I think both of these guys are pretty much dead nuts.
I'm with you there. I don't think there's an advantage on either team as far as that goes. The only thing I will say, though, is that I think this game is going to be so close it may come down to one of those two guys to win the game.
Yeah, and I could absolutely agree with that. The other thing that I'll say is that I think that having to wait on one of these players to kick a game-winning field goal, both teams would be okay with these guys kicking a 30-yarder to win a game.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure.
So a lot of confidence on both sides in the kickers, and I think rightfully so. I guess now we can tackle the running backs. Clemson loses probably one of the greatest running backs, if not the greatest running back of all time, in Travis Etienne.
Yeah.
Travis Etienne had 588 receiving yards. The guy had great hands. He was the number 3 receiving guy on the team, and rushing. He was basically a half a game away, if that, from having a 1,000-yard season. He carried the ball 168 times. The guy's an absolute machine.
Yes.
It was a pleasure to watch him play. You could add up the next 3 players on the team, and they still didn't have as many touchdowns as he did. The guy is just incredible.
Yeah, there's some guys you don't replace Travis Etienne with one guy.
No.
You have to replace him with multiple guys because he has the skill set of multiple positions, like you just mentioned with the receiving.
Yeah.
I think Clemson's done a pretty good job of doing that. So they don't have. I mean, you not say, well, this guy's going to be Travis Etienne next year. That's not happening.
Nobody in college football you can put a finger on and say that guy's going to be as good as Travis Etienne next year. That's not going to happen.
The positive part about this, as a Clemson fan, is that depth-wise, this is the deepest that I've seen Clemson's running back room. In the last decade. Ever since you had like C.J. Spiller and Davis back there,
right?
So Lynn J. Dixon is a he's a senior. He's been the backup for Travis Etienne all this time. So it'll be most likely split between him and the new guy coming in, the 5-star Will Shipley, who I got a chance to see these guys at the spring game. And I know the spring game is nothing more than a glorified scrimmage, but
right.
You still get a chance to see them up close and see what their speed is like, what their hands are like. And Will Shipley is a sort of a Swiss Army knife running back, sort of like Travis Etienne was. They'll use him a lot in the slot position. He'll get a lot of receiving yards, and he's a nimble runner. Lynn J. Dixon will most likely get the brunt of the carries, at least in this first game against Georgia, because he's the most experienced and he knows the offense better than anybody else. The two guys I'm excited about seeing, Kobe Pace, who's a sophomore, is a huge. He's a bruising. The closest thing I can compare him to is like a Derrick Henry. Now, big shoes to fill, but my point, physically and the way that he runs, is a lot like Derrick Henry. A big guy, but extremely fast. And then we have a true freshman coming in that everybody's really excited about. A guy named Phil Maffa. Who I believe was the number one running back in the state of Florida, recruit wise. So they have 4 guys that can play 3 downs, and so that we haven't had that in a while.
So the guy that I'm interested in watching for you guys, honestly, as a running back, is Shipley.
Yeah,
I watched some of his highlights. Even his high school highlights are pretty impressive. I'm a little bit excited to see him play, but not against us.
Yeah,
I don't want to play this guy.
Well, the comparison is made between him and Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
For one reason is because he's white. Okay, with that, let's just go ahead and get that out there. That's the main reason people compare him to him. But skin color aside, it really has to do with his skill set. This is a guy that you'll see that return kicks. Like I said before, you'll see him play the slot position a lot. So he'll do a little bit of everything.
Just so we're clear, I am 100% against star athletes being returners for punts. Yeah, I hate seeing that, man.
Yeah,
because most of the time you're going to get 2 or 3 yards, maybe 4, if not lose yards. And a lot of guys get injured on those plays.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I understand the excitement of it. I understand wanting to win. But for me, put a guy in there who you're not going to be depending on 8 plays a drive. Let that guy earn a spot. But that's just me.
I can see that. And a lot of people feel that way. Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what he can do. One of the things that I noticed during the spring game, because I watched it, is that he is unafraid.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He is fearless. He runs right through a pile of people like they're not even there. He's got more power than what people think.
Yeah.
He does what a good running back should do, which is before he gets to the line, he encases the ball. He leans down and he basically runs like the juggernaut through a line of people.
I know that's what worries me a little bit. Is you're right. He's fearless, and that scares me a little bit.
So what I'm curious is, this is going to be his first real opponent. Like, this is the first time
it'll be his first ever opponent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's played in high school.
Well, yeah.
What I'm saying is that this is the first time he's going to line up against a serious Power 5 opponent. Mm-hmm. When you guys play Boston College, by all means, hammer down. But if he comes through that line like that, Georgia's linebacker group is some mean sons of guns.
Yeah.
You're looking at guys like Quay Walker. We did lose Azeez Ojulari, which is, that's going to hurt. But you're looking at Lewis Seen, who is technically listed as a defensive back, but is one of the leading tacklers on the team. This guy's all over the field. He's not a guy that you want to just roll up in there and be like, this is going to be fine, because it's not. On top of that, Georgia's number one tackler from last year, Nakobe Dean, is coming back, and he is a force to be reckoned with. He's 6 foot 220, but he's everywhere. He recorded 39 solo tackles last year, 39, 71 TOTs. You're not just going to run past this Georgia secondary group like it's nothing. And I'm a little concerned when you got another guy like Nolan Smith, and I don't know if you know who Nolan Smith is. Nolan Smith is a 6'3", 235-pound linebacker going into his junior year. And if this guy hits you, you're going to take a minute and get your breath back, because he's intense. When you get a true freshman who runs into something like that, he may get one or two good runs. I'm curious as to what's going to happen if he gets dump trucked. So, and here's the thing. I'm not saying I want Georgia to do that. I'm not saying I want that to happen to this young man. I'm saying just the opposite. I'm saying I don't want to see him get popped, because he's not used to that level of competitiveness. Those guys who have been in the system for 3 or 4 years, who've been in the weight room at Clemson or Georgia for 3 or 4 years, and all of a sudden a freshman running back just plows through there, not giving those guys due respect.
Yeah, and I'm with you, but I believe that the Clemson's coaching staff obviously knows what you're saying right now, and I think they'll sort of ease him in there. I don't think they're going to throw him into the wolves like that. He won't get the majority of the carries.
Now hold on, Pete. Now you can't do me like that. You can't say that they're going to take care of a player and then they're just going to throw Justin Ross on the field. Now we can't have it both ways.
I'm saying, as far as the play calling goes, as being a true freshman, he's not going to be the main guy.
No, Dixon's going to be your starter.
He may be the main guy. Well, certainly next season. And we'll see how Maffa does as well. Maffa might be there'll be a competition between Shipley and Phil Maffa over the next couple of years. We'll see which one emerges as the lead guy there. But
so you're saying you think Lynn Dixon is going to be your star back?
Yeah. Well, he'll get the majority of the carries for sure.
Okay. I got a couple of questions here about this guy. I think his name is Shea Malesi.
Yeah, he transferred.
He transferred?
He transferred to Wisconsin.
Wow.
Yeah, like last week. Well, because there's 4 guys ahead of him. We got the 4 guys that is named. Dixon, Shipley, Pace, and Maffa are probably all ahead of him on the depth chart.
Wow.
He's a good player, but
I would think he would be like the number 2 guy, because as far as rushing stats go, he's the number 2 guy.
Yeah. Yeah, he's good. Again, good player. And that was my point, is losing Etienne's losing Etienne, but the running back room is so crowded right now. It's more crowded than I've seen it in the past 10 years. So
what about
Kobe?
Okay. I can understand if there's a lot of guys in there. That's why I'm asking so many questions about these guys. What about Kobe Pace?
Yeah, that's one of the 4 guys I mentioned. So here's in my opinion, the way that the order goes as far as depth. Lynn J, Shipley, Pace would be 3rd, I'd say, and then Phil Maffa, who's a true freshman. So we don't really know about Maffa as much as we know about Pace. Pace is a sophomore. Pace is the guy that impressed me the most at the spring game. He got a lot of playing time, and he's a bruiser. He's
5'10", but he's 205 pounds. He's like a fire plug.
Yeah, he's a bowling ball. He's the between the tackles guy.
He's gonna have to make a big step up this year. Last year he only logged 75 yards. So if he's going to be the number 2 guy, he's definitely.
I think he'll be the number three guy.
Yeah, number 3 guy. I can see Pace being the number 2 guy. Dixon, while he's probably going to end up being the starter, I feel like he's maybe a little undersized. He's not even 200 pounds, and I feel like if you're going to be the bruiser, and I get Travis Etienne was only like 210, but I think that extra 10 or 15 pounds makes a big difference between the tackles.
Yeah, and so you're right. I think Pace will be the mainly the between the tackles guy. Lynn J's going to take on a sort of the similar role that Etienne took on, as far as as being the Swiss Army knife out of the backfield. I think you're going to see an increase in him. He didn't do a whole lot of catching the football last year.
Yeah,
I think you'll see an increase in that this season, and that's the word that's coming out of Clemson is that they've been working on that with him for this year.
Now, I think that anytime you lose a caliber player, and some Georgia fans might get mad, but that's okay. When you lose a guy of the caliber of like a Todd Gurley, a Nick Chubb, a Travis Etienne, because there's no doubt in my mind that he's on that level. There's a void there for a little while. Now, Georgia's been pretty good at filling that void. Georgia's running back room is insane right now. You know, they have a very similar problem. Except with Georgia, we didn't lose anybody. So Georgia returns Zamir White, probably going to be the number one, if not number two guy. Those things are kind of always up in the air for Georgia, but more likely than not, he'll be the number one guy. He's 6 foot 215. He has very good speed for his size. Averages 5 yards a carry plus. Then Georgia goes into James. Well, let's see. Zamir White had over almost 800 yards last year. James Cook at the 5'11", 190. He's kind of that nimble guy who kind of jumps around. Georgia has done a very good job over the years of basically having a power back and then having an agility back. And they kind of hit you with that two-headed monster, so it can be difficult to contain. I think Clemson does a pretty good job of figuring out how to stop that. But then you got to throw in guys like Kenny McIntosh. Kenny McIntosh, another guy, he's 6'1", 210. And he's averaging over 5 yards. James Cook is averaging almost 7 yards. Georgia returns Deshaun Edwards. He, as the number 4 running back, got over 200 yards last year, and he's averaging almost 6 yards, 5.9. Kendall Milton, 6'1", 220 pounds. The guy is another bowling ball. He got just shy of 200 yards, and he's averaging over 5 yards a carry. So with Georgia in the running back room, it really doesn't matter which one of these guys we throw in. They seem to be able to get some pretty substantial yardage on the ground.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody that's ever going into any given season thinking, hey, I wonder if Georgia's going to be good at running the football.
Well, we're good at two things: losing big games and having good running backs. Apparently,
right, yes, absolutely. I just hope you lose this big game. That's all, brother.
No, not happening. Not happening. So since we're talking about losing big games, and let's go ahead and acknowledge that last year's games or games from 10 years ago or championships from 10 years ago are never going to help you win a game at all.
Right.
In the current season. What is Georgia versus Clemson's all-time record? Do you happen to know, sir?
Well, I believe Uncle Lou it repeats it on a daily basis, so it's 42 to 18 or something like that. 42.
I believe it's 48.
48. Okay. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's 42 to 18.
Yeah. 42 to 18. That's what I said.
It's a little one-sided. I just want to make sure you knew.
Oh yeah. I know. And Michigan fans keep telling me how they're the most winning football program in the history of football, but that
that's
Michigan,
not true. That's not true, by the way.
But Michigan is a laughing stock right now. That's not helping them right now.
So what team do you think has the most wins ever?
Well, according to Michigan fans, it's Michigan. I don't know.
Well, let me see here. I looked this up one time before, and I think there was another team that if you actually you have to dig into it a little bit, but I think there's another team that their numbers weren't counted.
What is it like Princeton or some?
I think it's like Yale or Princeton or something. Well, there was like 20 or 30 years there where they didn't record.
Yeah, right.
They don't count those numbers, so even a Michigan fan doesn't want to hear that. So,
right.
I'll have to find that number again and pull it up. So anyway, I'm going to give the advantage to Georgia on the running back side. What would you say? I would give Georgia a 9, if not a 9.5. I can't make myself believe that Clemson's going to be that good after losing a star like Travis Etienne.
No. I mean, I would. I'm not going to give Clemson a 9.5. So, I mean, I don't know if you're overrating Georgia's.
Well, yeah, of course.
I would say a solid 8.5 for Clemson's running back room, and not because of one particular person. And this is the key to this. It's just because of the depth.
Yeah,
we got 4 guys that could start for any team in America, and we haven't had that recently.
Well, that's absolutely true. I would say Georgia probably has a similar problem.
Yeah.
So I just think with the experience at the number 1 and number 2, number 3, and number 4 position at Georgia, all those guys are coming back. I think that's going to lend an advantage. I think experience matters. I really do.
Yeah.
I guess we should now talk about the tight end position. So you guys have a guy who is a monster. I cannot remember his name.
Well, we got Brandon Galloway, who is he's been the number 1 guy for the past couple of seasons. And there's another guy coming in now, and now his name's escaping me.
There's Brandon Galloway. You guys also have a Davis Allen who looks to be pretty good.
Yeah, right.
That's there was another guy. Who was it? I watched him. I don't know if it was Chalk. Was it Chalk that I saw in the spring game? It was one of those guys in the spring game looked like a monster.
Yeah, I think that was Allen.
Brad and Galloway, which by the way, your announcers are terrible at names.
Yeah, I know.
This guy's 6'4", 240 pounds. He's a beast. He averages like 13.5 yards a carry. And we're not talking with 1 or 2 receptions. We're talking 27.
Yeah, he's the best. He's the best receiving tight end that we've had in a while.
So I would definitely say that guy is pretty impressive. Height wise, stature wise, 6'4", 240. The other guy, where's he at? Davis Allen.
Uh-huh.
Davis Allen is what, 6'6", 250.
Yeah, he had a huge spring game. He's a giant guy.
He might be the guy I'm thinking of then.
Yeah, that's the guy you're thinking of.
This guy's a monster.
Yeah, he's just younger. Galloway, there's a lot of the comparisons made between Galloway and I'm sure you remember Jordan Leggett from the 2016 national championship team.
Right.
Yeah.
So I got to compare him against Georgia's tight ends. Mm-hmm. Numbers are pretty comparable to all these guys. I mean, you're talking 200 yards. Brandon Galloway had 369 yards, which is impressive because he was pretty much the go-to guy for short passes. Georgia's linebacker at John Fitzpatrick had 95. Darnell Washington had 166. Georgia's starting to roll the tight ends a little more into the game plan with Todd Monken at the helm. That having been said, I think as a tight end, both size and height really, really matter. I think anytime you got a 6'6" tight end, that's great. You got a 6'4" tight end that can catch, that's really great. Both of Georgia's tight ends are 6'7", 255 and 260.
Yeah. You
couple that with Eric Gilbert, who can line up in the tight end position if necessary. Pretty nasty. However, in this particular category here, I have to give the advantage to Clemson. Both Davis Allen and Braden Galloway, just tons of experience. They're used to it. They've played at high levels. These guys are experienced. This is going to be a senior year for Braden, and this is going to be a junior year for Davis Allen.
Yeah.
This is a ton of leadership at that position, ton of experience. Both of these guys are averaging like 14, 15 yards. Georgia's averaging 9.5 for one, but 23.5 for the other. Had some big plays that pushed that number up for him. But yeah, he had two against Missouri. He had two plays where he got 61 yards. So he averaged 30 yards on that one. Against Kentucky, he had one play where he went 33. So those kind of inflated his numbers a little bit. Probably more consistent to say he's probably around the 14 or 15 number. This will be his sophomore year. John Fitzpatrick, this will be his junior year. But I got to go with Clemson on this. I would probably give those guys a 9, maybe a 9.5 at the tight end. I would probably give Georgia a 7.
Yeah, and that's something that's been lacking from Clemson's game, honestly. Well, 2 seasons ago, Galloway was suspended for an entire season. So, that was unfortunate. And of course, last year was the shortened year, so he didn't get to play 12 games or whatever. But Yeah, that's it's a definitely one of the best tight end groups that we've had in a while since 2016.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're not looking at like a Kyle Pitts type situation where
No.
every other pass, but all of these guys are really talented. They all have the right size, stature, speed, but Clemson's definitely got more experience. And
they've made it public that they're focusing on the tight end position to be more involved in the passing game this year than in the past couple of years. They've made it a point of emphasis.
So and that's good to see. I like seeing these big guys catch the ball and just kind of, for lack of a better term, just kind of bumble down the field. And because they look like they're moving in slow motion, but they're not. And people are basically 4 or 5 guys trying to drag them down, and you're just like, I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah.
I love watching that because I'm a big guy. So it's always fun to see the big guys do that. I'm like, yeah, that's right. That's right. Get them, big guy. So, yeah. And well, what does that leave? I mean, we've covered the defensive backs, the linebackers.
We've covered everything. We've covered everything except for the offensive line, but nobody cares about those fat boys anyway.
Yeah, nobody cares about those guys.
Nobody cares about those fat boys.
So you tell me, what would you put Clemson's offensive line at?
Oh my god, they've always had. They've always had, I would say, a 6 or 7.
Okay.
Their first string guys, all great. Okay, they've actually recruited really well at that position over the past couple of years. But again, depth wise on the offensive line is very shaky. So if we have an injury to one of these starters, I mean that's the worry. Also, here's the main thing: is that we're replacing one of the best offensive line we've ever had in Jackson Carman.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I'll have my eye on, because we know how good we've already discussed how good of a defensive line and linebacker core that Georgia has. That's going to be a key to this. Now, Big Cinco can move around if the offensive line's not great. Obviously, he's a big guy and he's mobile, but that's the thing that's the main thing. No, everyone else is looking at the receivers and the running backs and all the flashy stuff. I'm going to be looking at how this Clemson offensive line holds up against Georgia's defensive line early in the game.
So here's Georgia's breakdown. I can't contest or confirm anything about the Clemson offensive line. I basically have to go off of whatever you say. I don't know much about those guys. What I can say is that Georgia legitimately has some NFL draft players here. Jamari Sawyer, left guard 1, starter. Warren Erickson, Clay Webb, Devin Willock, excuse me. Those are all – we're 4 deep left guard. We're 4 deep at center. Georgia struggled at center a few times, but Trey Hill is going to be the starter. He may declare for the draft, and we'll see what happens. But as of right now, he's still playing for Georgia. Right tackle, we got Warren McClendon, Broderick Jones, Amarius Mims, Austin Blaski. And, I mean, that's what we have. Most of those guys are really, really solid. I think Georgia's offensive line is going to take a big step forward this year, and it's going to need to. Left tackle, Xavier Truss, Broderick Jones, Amarius Mims. Georgia rotates guys out like it's, Skittles. It's just candy. Just everybody get in there and play. I think that's going to make it a little bit hard to match up with. Georgia's probably going to move some guys around to try and figure out who can block who better pretty quick. So don't be surprised if you see like Amarius Mims at left and then they move him to right. I know that's not common, but if we're getting a lot of penetration, Georgia's going to have to do something.
You're gonna have to do something against Miles Murphy and Brian Brzee. I'm telling you.
Yeah. Now, we're going to have to perform some magic tricks from time to time, maybe some razzle dazzle, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
What do you think the game's deciding factor is going to come down to?
And I know it sounds cliche because literally every college football game comes down to this, but it's going to be in the trenches. The big boys on each side of the line, defensive line and offensive linemen. Whoever can get the most pressure on the quarterback And I think that, and so I know you believe Georgia's going to win the game, and you believe whatever reasons that you believe, but I believe that the advantage here is to Clemson because of the trenches, and mainly because the quarterback for Georgia is not as mobile as the quarterback for Clemson to escape that pressure. Because I think you're going to see a lot of pressure put on both of these quarterbacks throughout the game.
So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure definitely put on the quarterbacks, and I think, and I'm pretty sure, and if they don't, they're stupid. I think the Georgia coaching staff understands that offensive line is probably not going to be able to hold back Clemson all game.
Yeah.
It's just probably not going to be able to do it. So the question is what is your game plan going to be? Todd Monken has really started shifting the offense to being more diverse. And when you look at the fact that Georgia was able to get Eric Gilbert to come to Georgia, I think that's a little bit of a smoke signal that Georgia is changing the offense, taking that next step forward.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about that. Yeah.
I really think that Georgia is going to put itself in a position to where they're not going to depend on the offensive line for very long. Now, there are going to be times where Georgia is going to be able to put a play in to get a ball downfield. But I think what you're going to see against this pretty dominant Clemson defensive line is that the tight ends and the big wide receivers, by the way, Justin Robinson, didn't talk about him, but he's going to be back as well. He's pretty dynamic. He's 6'5", 220, wide receiver, runs like the wind. We also have Amari Smith. But anyway, you're looking at, I think, a Georgia change in instead of running the ball right at you, you're going to see a lot of the quick kind of check down passes, quick speed passes. That's what Georgia had to do about halfway through the fourth quarter to be able to deal with Cincinnati. So I know Georgia can do it. Georgia's defense held up really well. I think that if Georgia can transition to making the middle, over the middle passes with the big tight ends, with a big wide receiver, Georgia can transition to getting the running backs out to the edges. I think Georgia can move the ball consistently and then every now and then take a big shot downfield. I think that the problem that Clemson is going to have to deal with is that there is no weapon on offense that you can solo out. When Georgia walks out Jermaine Burton, when they walk out Eric Gilbert, they walk out any of those guys, when you have two tight ends that are incredibly good, you have 5 wide receivers. If you put all those guys on the field, who are you going to double cover? Because you can't double cover them all. I just think there's too many weapons for Georgia to be limited for long. I think Clemson has a great offense, but I think their offense is going to take a step back. I think because of that, Georgia will win that game. I think it may be a solo score game or, if lucky, 10 points, but it's not going to be a blowout.
Okay. I say my final score prediction here is going to be 31-28 Clemson. I think it's going to come down to the final drive. And we were talking about the kickers earlier. It could very easily be a situation where one of these kickers has to kick a game-winning field goal or even possibly an overtime game. I mean, look, there's a reason. Vegas has Clemson favored by what, 3.5 or whatever it is?
Yep.
So, Vegas doesn't lie. Vegas doesn't. There's no homers in Vegas. They only care about making money. So Vegas believes that this is a field goal game, and I believe them. And either way, so
Alabama's favored in every game they play.
Yeah. Well, I said either way. So I'm saying Georgia could win by 3 too. I'm giving them credit where credit's due. There's neither one of these teams are getting blown out. So for anybody who thinks that, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I don't think either team's getting blown out.
Yeah,
I definitely think that I think the game's going to be close, but I'm gonna push a little higher on the score. I think it's probably going to be around 42-35.
Wow.
I really think that for a number of reasons. Number one, it's first season of the game. First game of the season, excuse me. I think that there's going to be some getting into a rhythm, getting used to players that you haven't played against. I think there's going to be some mistakes that are made, and that's going to cost players big. I think that both of these quarterbacks are capable of hurting you downfield if you make a mistake. So if you let a Clemson, if you let a guy like EJ Williams, if you let a guy like EJ Williams get behind you 6'3", what are you going to do to this guy? Nothing. You can't let this guy get behind you. So I think that I think Big Ocho or Big Cinco, I think he's perfectly willing to make you hurt if you let that guy behind you. And I think that JT Daniels has proved that he will too. I think that both of these teams will have that happen. I think both of us are going to do a facepalm a couple of times during the game, like, oh my, why? What are you doing? I think that's going to happen because it's the first game of the season and they're trying to fill each other out. Yeah. So because of that, I'm willing to give each team about a touchdown more than I normally would. But I can certainly see it coming down to it being tied going into the fourth quarter, and then somebody makes a mistake and one team wins. And I think that if that happens and the other team manages to get close enough to kick a field goal for insurance, I think they will.
Right.
But, yeah, I've been wrong before. So,
yeah, I've never been wrong before, ever.
Right. So I think that pretty much solidifies everything. I think it was a really good breakdown. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, man. Anytime. I can't believe it's been this long. Took us this long to get on together.
Well, it's my fault, really. I don't invest the amount of time into this I should. I stay busy.
Well, here's what we'll do. We'll go ahead and solidify. We'll no matter what happens in the game, the week after the game, we'll come back on together and talk about what happened. How about that?
Absolutely.
Right.
Great idea. I'm down for that. So,
all right.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Pete. You guys have a great day. And as always, God bless. Go Dogs.